incorporate the dry pigment particles into the resin itself so that they're fully coated. Hi, I'm Sally Marriott. I'm a freelance paintings conservator here working at Pallant House today on Christopher Wood's The White Vase. So the stage we're at now is that the painting has been cleaned. It had a lot of surface dirt on it and a thick nicotine layer, and then followed by a discoloured varnish layer. So I've been sort of cleaning the painting, working down the layers until we've got to this stage, and it has just had a very light coat of varnish put on it, a conservation grade varnish. And we're now at the retouching phase. So I thought I would just show you and talk a little bit about the retouching method and how I go about it. So for this particular painting, I'm using a resin called Larapal A81, which is an aldehyde resin. The reason why I'm using that rather than oil paints, a lot of people often think that if you're retouching an oil painting, you would use oil paint. The reason why we don't do that is because if I did, essentially in 20 years' time, it would be impossible to separate the layers and remove my non-original paint from the original surface if I wanted to, or if somebody else wanted to. So as a paintings conservator, everything that I put onto a painting, the idea is that it's always reversible. And using synthetic modern adhesives and resins, you can, they have different solubilities to the oil paint, so they're easily removed. And they also have really good stability. So for example, if I was retouching in a natural resin or even an oil paint, those natural materials would discolour within quite a short period of time, whereas a synthetic modern conservation grade resin shouldn't discolour for up about 200 years. So they're much more stable. So I'm just going to show you how I make up my paints. So first of all, you get solid resin. It comes in lump form, the aldehyde resin called Larapal A81. And you dissolve it in a solvent. So this is dissolved in something called 1-methoxypropantool, and you get this kind of honey-like consistency. You can make it thicker or thinner depending on your preference. And I literally will just take a small amount of it and put it on a palette. It's a completely clear resin. And then you take dry pigments. So these are pure artist quality pigments. I'm going to take raw umber. We keep the lids on them because some of these pigments are actually quite toxic. So the cadmium orange, the cadmium yellow, the cadmium red, they are quite toxic pigments in their dry form. So we keep the lids on just to make sure you don't breathe any of it in. This is raw umber. It's a completely natural earth colour, so there's no kind of hazard. Take a little bit of the dry pigment on a little spatula. I've just wet it with a bit of solvent so it sticks. And then you just mix it, grind it into the resin. This is where I had raw umber before, which is why I've selected this particular area on my palette. And you want to just grind it in using this method to really incorporate the dry pigment particles into the resin itself so that they're fully coated. And then the way I personally work is I make up a selection of colours on the outside of my palette and then I mix in the centre. And to do that, I have a small sable brush. It's a retouching brush. They're very, very fine, beautiful soft brush. And I use, my diluent is 1-methoxypropanol, and I just literally dip the brush in there, choose whichever colour I want, and then mix in the centre. And you can make it as loose or as thick as you like, depending on how glossy you want the paint, how thick you need the paint to be. Or if you want it as like a really thin glaze, you can also do that as well. So they're really versatile and will be removable totally easily without causing any damage to the original paint surface.